Alright, if this is the first time you're clicking on one of my videos, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. If you are a returning viewer, maybe you've been following my recent big martial knife exploration journey. And in a recent installment, we looked at the Cold Steel GI Tanto. Specifically, that I had put off buying myself one for many years because of all the reasons I thought I wouldn't like it. And then I got it in my hands and discovered I mostly like it. And I felt really stupid for not buying myself one sooner. And here we are, sort of right back there. Now, I've reviewed some sub-hilts, specifically Cold Steel sub-hilts, the OSS, the OSI, the Black Bear Classic, and yes, I have to insert an apology here because I've been promising some content on the pragmatic functionality of the sub-hilt versus the conventional grip, and I have not gotten around to it yet. Well, here's maybe some impetus to finally make that happen. I promise, really this time. But in that line of Cold Steel sub-hilts, there was a knife that I kept glancing at, but because of its design, proportions, the balance of the blade to the grip and what the grip is made out of, I didn't think it could possibly appeal to me. That it wouldn't feel right, it wouldn't work right for me, I would just hate it. So for years and years and years, I didn't buy one. And you know from the title of the video, we're talking about the Cold Steel Marauder. So was I an idiot? Again. Quick historic aside. I have heard that the Cold Steel Marauder, it's not a replica of anything they used, but was inspired by the exploits and accomplishments of Merrill's Marauders, who fought against the Japanese in Burma during World War II. So if you feel like doing a little homework and are interested in that sort of thing, definitely check out their story. Let's start, as we often do, with the out-of-the-box edge. Now, this version is in AUS 8 steel that my test files are putting somewhere slightly above 60 HRC, so that's pretty impressive. Also, this version has a stone-washed finish. I'll talk about that in fit and finish, but also a flat ground saber grind profile. Not a hollow grind, which I definitely appreciate. The secondary edge bevel, yes, but it seems to be pretty well done. The false edge is not sharpened. Let's see how the edge is. Paper? Okay. It's a little bit toothy, but yeah, pretty nice. A little bit of cardboard. Oh yeah. Pretty nice. I don't have much to say about this Cold Steel SecureX sheath. A lot of YouTubers have already covered the pros and definite cons of this design, including myself, but a couple of things I do want to mention specific to this one. One thing I had to do pretty much immediately, that I also had to do with the SecureX sheaths on all of my other Cold Steel sub-hilts, the OSS, the OSI, and the Black Bear Classic. Originally, these rather high feed lips were a uniform shape. But what that did was covered up about that much of my access to getting my index finger above that sub-hilt to assist in the draw. And that didn't make any sense. So I used one of the drums of my belt sander to make a nice circular relief cut big enough to get my finger in there to assist with the draw. Speaking of assist with the draw, the lockup on these sheaths can be, well, very inconsistent. And they're achieved with 4 little nubs that lock around whatever guard the knife has. Now, if it's too tight, you can make it looser by carefully shaving those down. But since the guard on this knife, just like the OSS and the OSI, is made out of Kraton rubber, I found the easier path was simply to bevel the bottom edges of the guard projections. And not only did that make the knife more comfortable in hand, and we'll talk about that in handling, but allowed me to adjust the fit until the thumb break was just right. Before we get into testing and handling, let's talk about specs, fit, finish, build quality, and the reasons why I did not buy this sooner. But I do think putting off buying it worked in my favor because earlier iterations of the knife that have a satin finish also had a hollow ground edge, and I'm not a personal fan of hollow grinds. It's just me. This version has a flat saber ground profile that I think is just awesome. All the lines are really clean and attractive. Speaking of attractive, I'm also usually not a fan of stone-washed finishes, but this one is exceptionally well done. Actually kind of stone looking. Very attractive. We'll see how it holds up. Speaking of how it holds up, AUS 8A blade. Test files say it's pushing potentially 60 HRC. We'll see how it handles impact and such. Does not have a sharpened back edge. Something I might go ahead and put on there based on how I tend to use blades of this profile. Haven't decided yet. But let's talk about the specs when it comes to my concerns. And the first number I'm going to throw out at you, though, is $62 US is what I just bought this for at Chicago Knife Works. Best deal I could find. They tend to run in the 70s. So there's your risk. Is it worth buying to take a chance on? For me, it was, and I'm glad I did. Oops, spoiler alert. But specifications, when it comes to my concerns, we need to look at these side by side. All right, the exact same Kraton rubber grips on the Marauder as are on the OSS and the OSI. Now that includes a Kraton rubber guard and sub-hilt hook, and some people are concerned that's not going to protect you from anything. Well, it's really not designed to protect you from an incoming blade. It probably could get away with taking a few hits. But it's really designed to keep your hand in place so it doesn't slip off or slip up under impact. And it does that job really well. Now on all of these, I did slightly bevel all the corners on the guard and the sub-hilt hook just to make it more comfortable for the way my fingers sit. It was a fairly easy job, but otherwise didn't make any changes. I have thought about buying a set of these to cut the sub-hilts off to see how that performs. I may still do that. That could be a to be continued. But the biggest issue, exact same grip, but definitely look at the difference in the blades. This is what put me off. All right, so OSI, OSS, basically the same blade size. 8-inch blade versus a 9-inch blade, so 23 centimeters. Blade width, that's about an inch. Widest point here is 2 inches, 5 centimeters, so twice as wide. Blade thickness is actually about the same at about 5 millimeters. That's pretty stout. Grip lengths, if I measure the top from the guard to the bottom hook here, that's 4 1/4 inches, about 11 centimeters. Overall length, of course, because the grip is the same length, this is an inch longer than the OSS OSI at 14 1/4 inches, 36 centimeters. But weight, okay. 9 ounces, which is slightly heavier than the OSS because of the blade profile, versus 13 ounces, 368 grams. So this is just about 50% heavier than the OSS and the OSI. What does that do to the balance? Well, in the OSS and the OSI, they're balanced for speed, maneuverability, and thrusting, so that balance point is pretty much right there on the guard. Balance point on this one, which I was frankly terrified of. I figured this blade combined with this light grip was going to make basically a hatchet out of it. All right, turns out the point of balance is, okay, it is blade forward, but it's only about 1.5 inches into the blade, about 4 centimeters. We're going to definitely talk about how that feels in handling, but first let's go ahead and run my impact tests and see how it holds up. All right, we're back post-testing. And this is where I throw in my caveat. If you're looking for hard bushcraft style testing, you're not going to see that on my channel. A lot of other YouTubers have put this knife through that kind of testing. Definitely check out their videos. Hopefully I can give you the collector's perspective and the martial practitioner's perspective, but yes, I do run my blades through a series of durability and impact tests to see how the edge and the build holds up and how it translates impact back into me. So, test number 1, thrusting and stabbing into my pel. Stab him. Stab him is multiple layers of thick cardboard over a couple of inches of compressed brown paper bag paper over wood. And yeah, stabbing, very effective in terms of penetration. And also, it's a very grippy hilt, something I discovered with the OSS and the OSI, and this is no different. But even though the OSS, OSI, and yes, the Black Bear are designed for stabbing and thrusting for penetration, I think this might actually potentially be better at it. I might have to do some side-by-side testing, so stay tuned. And that's without improving that back edge yet. That's still blunt, haven't touched it. Also flipped it around, edge towards me, North American Bowie style, which is actually really starting to appeal to me, not just in the use of the clip point, but in the thrusting geometry. Is that sub-hilt in the way doing that? Well, if you see what I'm doing here with a handshake grip, actually not really. Just as long as I rounded those corners a little bit, that you can make that work. The sub-hilt doesn't necessarily need to be removed to be out of your way gripping it this way. So, thrusting test, excellent. Next test, a lot of people feel like this one's kind of abusive. Slashing and hacking into a big piece of hard bamboo. What I'm looking for is a fragile edge that is easy to chip or roll. And this one did exceptionally well. Forward grip, reverse grip, no problems whatsoever. Absolutely zero damage. Next test. Used it a bit as a tool. Shaved some wood. It's a pretty slicey knife. I took it to, well, this is something I did off camera and I'll probably revisit when I do a lot of the side-by-side comparisons, but I had a handful of knives to test at the same time and a whole bunch of stockpiled cardboard I had to cut up into the shapes I like to use for targets, so I figured I'd just test them side by side. And this one is pretty slicey, but yes, the width of the blade does create some resistance going through big sheets of really thick cardboard, but it's not a bad tool for that. Chopping into boards. So really effective chopper, very comfortable, took zero damage. So yes, you could employ this potentially as a field tool. And yeah, I also did a little bit of batoning with it just to see how that would do, and it's fine. A little tiny bit of scuffing, I would say, you might be able to see on that stonewash finish, but not bad at all. So in all of those tests, it held up pretty well. So let's go ahead and talk about martial handling. All right, finally, my martial handling and overall impressions, which will quickly revisit the question, should I have bought this for myself sooner? And the answer is still yes and no. And it's no because putting it off did get me the saber ground version versus the hollow ground version, which, spoiler alert, I think lets me love this knife even more. Not going to cover carry much or the pros and cons of the SecureX. Covered that in other videos, so have, well, a lot of other YouTubers. But one of the pros of the SecureX, right now I have it shoved into my belt for cone carry style, is you get that positive thumb brake and the knife flies free. But the first thing we really do have to go into in a bit of detail is the sub-hilt. I'm going to do a dedicated video on this and some side-by-side comparisons, but here's the condensed version. It's going to add a couple of minutes on to the review. Sorry about that. But I wanted to cover the one major downside complaint concern that folks have versus the benefits I've discovered using these for about 3-4 years. And the big downside everybody brings up is it's in my way. I can't have that, need to get rid of it, it's in my way, or it causes hot spots. We're definitely going to talk about how it does and doesn't in different grips and what you can do about it. But the two upsides. One, added retention in certain functions. We'll talk about parrying in a second, but one place it comes up regularly is when you need to put more pull on getting this out of something it might be stuck in, which frequently includes just drawing it out of its own sheath. Being able to hook your finger on there for the extra bit of pull in the draw is an awesome feature. I also get that a bit in knife grips that just have really deep index finger grooves here. So sort of that, but more so in this case. Does it also cause hot spots? We'll talk about that. You can certainly round it off and make it fit your hand a little bit better to reduce that, or you might find it unbearable. My advice to you is, if you don't already have experience with these, if you have an opportunity to handle one, or are willing to take the risk on a less expensive purchase, especially something like this where you could just cut it off if you didn't like it, give it a try, and in the comments let me know what you think. Or if you do like sub-hilts, let me know what you think the ups and downs are. But I think the biggest and most unique benefit of sub-hilt is in snap cutting. What am I talking about? I'm using a handshake grip and I'm choking down. I'm getting my hand away from the guard, gives me a little bit more reach, a little bit more protection. Also with my medium width hands, it's letting me really hug this point down here at the base of the grip. So pretty positive. Palm sole fits in my hand really well. But what's happening in the snap cut is my index finger is giving just, they call it a trigger action, people who like this design, a little bit extra pull, a little bit extra snap in your snap cut. And with those lighter OSS, OSI, Black Bear Classic blades, it's almost a necessity to get a good cut out of those really light, insubstantial blades. And it also makes the blades really quick in doing that. Now this blade doesn't need that so much. It's got good mass, good presence, good balance, and a lot of cutting belly. But having that enhancement in the snap cut, yes, it is an enhancement. It does make it, I think, a little bit extra choppy cutty in snap cutting. Is this as quick as those lighter knives? No, and I will, again, do some side-by-side comparisons, including side-by-side comparisons with knives that don't have the sub-hilt, and see if there really is any difference. But it feels like there is. I definitely can feel some benefit to that. Now, let's talk about whether or not it's in your way. In a hammer grip, it's just sort of sitting between your fingers. So it's not causing you any hot spots. It's not a big deal. I can choke all the way up and even lock my thumb over the guard for that close-in slashing, cutting, stabbing, and also utility use grip. So it's just kind of there. I did round some corners to make it more comfortable for my fingers. Handshake grip, it's just kind of there. Okay, what about flipping it around North American Bowie style? And so I did partially sharpen the clip point. It's not razor sharp, kind of like the swedge, the bone breaker on the back of the Cold Steel Outdoorsman, if you're familiar with that. So enhances what that tip can do in the back cut. Could definitely do some damage under impact and be effective there. And what you see I'm doing here is I'm holding it in a handshake grip so that the sub-hilt is just sitting into the web of my hand. So it kind of locks my hand in without being in the way to be able to use the knife this way. And as I've mentioned in other videos, when we're talking about clip points, I'm really, really appreciating what this geometry is doing for stabbing and thrusting, getting that tip on. It's pretty phenomenal, I'm discovering. I'm actually really appreciating having a knife in this grip. And this lets me do it. It's not really in my way that badly. Speaking of not really in my way that badly, we got to talk about reverse grip. And yeah, you just saw me do the finger twirl. The knife is skinny enough to let me do that. I don't recommend it because it's not very secure. Pinch flipping. You got some nice flare in the grip there that you can grab a hold of and index and flip it around. Now, depending on which orientation your blade is in. If it is in blade facing away from you orientation, I have two choices. One, I can slip my index or my pinky into the sub-hilt, and it's fine. Could be a bit of a hot spot depending on how your finger's fitting in there, but you can round some corners. It might be a bit of a fumble though. My other option, I do have enough room on the grip for me with my medium width hands to just grip it below the sub-hilt. Pretend that's the actual guard. That works just fine. Now, in the reverse grip with the blade facing towards me, I mentioned how you can use the S-curve quillins on certain Bowie knives to kind of lock the knife into your palm in this orientation. And in this case, The Sub-Hilt's doing that. I'm just fitting it right here into the heel of my hand. It's giving me some very interesting stability without taking the knife significantly out of line. And again, I have good blade geometry, not only for stabbing, but I could use the edge in those backwards cuts, and I can use the tip, the clip point, in the forward slashing. So it's working for me. What else is working for me? All right, this blade does have enough length, presence, inertia that I feel reasonably comfortable using it for parrying in a pinch. Now, I don't think those rubber quillins are going to take a whole lot of abuse, but maybe you could take a hit or two if you absolutely needed to. And in that, the Sub-Hilt, I feel, does help you deal with the torque that you might experience during a parry, that particular kind of impact. So, Sub-Hilt benefit. Can I use the blade for other things given its mass? Well, yeah, I could back cut with it now. I could use the spine. I could slap with the flat. It's got just enough mass to make that a useful option for some of those techniques. And yes, given its mechanics, I could punch with the blade. I have enough pommel to use that as an impact tool. So lots and lots of good uses. Overall impression, great value, first of all. If you don't like the Sub-Hilt, you could take it off. It is a great companion if you're already a fan of the OSS and the OSI, or just the Bowie knife in general. Because of, well, all the rubber down here, it is a bit lighter than some of the other knives this size, making it potentially easy for you to carry. Also not as shiny and attention-getting as, you know, brass and things like that. So, got a couple of upsides to it, practically speaking. The rubber grip it's really comfy. It's got a good sense of retention and security. Eats up impact really well. Feels great in chopping and stabbing and thrusting. So I think overall, really good knife, especially for the money, and I am glad I added it to my collection. When it comes to the big Martial knives, this is becoming a go-to. So let's cut it off here until I do those side-by-side comparisons. If you have any questions about this knife, if you have this knife, get our conversation going. Otherwise, as always, thank you for watching and following my journey, subscribing to the channel, liking the videos, and I do hope to see you back for where this journey's going.